deploying via Visual Studio is just one option. We can also use the CLI to do that. The first thing we need for that is, well, a set of files we want to deploy. So I've built our API in release mode here. I zipped those files and put them in my C users Kevin ready for publication folder. It's the travel inspiration API.zip file that we want to deploy. To deploy, we can use the AZ web app deploy command. So let's open PowerShell. AZ web app deploy is the command we need, and with --help we can get an overview of what we can do here. There's quite a few things you can configure here. With a restart argument, for example, you can control whether you want the app service to restart after you've deployed. By default it will. You do of course also want to pass through the resource group and the name of the app service you want to deploy to. Down here you can find a few examples of how common deployments would work. In our case we want to do a zip deployment, so we want to deploy the zip file we just created. So I execute AZ web app deploy and I first pass through the name of the app service. So that's -n appdev -app-dev -we travel inspiration. The next thing I want to pass through is the resource group with -g, and then I want to pass through the path to the zip file I want to deploy. We can do that with source path. Lastly, the type of deployment is a zip deployment, as I am deploying a zip file instead of a bunch of files separately. This is slightly faster, so I pass through zip as --type value. Alright, let's execute this. And there we go, the deployment has completed successfully. Let's verify this on the portal. So I navigate to the Travel Inspiration web app service. And let's open our API. And let me navigate to an endpoint that will effectively return something. So API/destinations. And there we go. Our API has been deployed and is up and running again. This should be sufficient for most scenarios. But sometimes you may need more direct access to what you've deployed. For example, you may want to access all the files independently. There's a tool that can help with that. It's named Kudu. Let's check it out. Every app service has the Kudu service installed. It can be accessed by adding .scm before .azurewebsites.net to the URL. So let me do that, and let's get rid of API/destinations here. You're looking at Kudu for our web app right now. It's also known as the Azure App Service Advanced Tools, and it's essentially a set of diagnostic and management features for Azure App Service. You can have a look at the environment itself. This includes application settings and environment variables. Via the Process Explorer, you can find the processes currently running on your app service. In our case, W3WP is up and running. That's an IIS worker process. There's a bunch of tools built in here you can use to get a hold of diagnostics, push a deployment, configure webhooks, and so on. I'm not going to run ahead of myself here. There's a lot of content on diagnostics coming up later on in the course. But the dump here has helped me out a few times. You essentially get a zip file with details about past deployments and a set of web server log files. That definitely comes in handy when you're trying to figure out something that's going wrong. One of the more interesting parts of Kudu is its debug console. Let's open the PowerShell version. What you see here is the file content of your web server. By navigating to site/www.root, we actually get to the deployed files. And from here, if needed, you can manipulate them, delete them, change them, add new files, and so on. So this is much like in the old days where you have access to File Explorer on your IIS web server to manipulate files over there. I'm not saying that using this is the advised approach. I believe automation via the CLI or preferably via a CI/CD pipeline is a much better and more reliable approach to deal with deployments. But sometimes this old school style approach can still come in handy. So if you need it, you now know where to find it. Almost all web applications have configurable application settings. For example, to configure the amount of destinations that can be returned. If I open our app settings file here, you effectively see this amount to return configured here in this file. It's currently set to 2. When deployed, the app setting file here is deployed as well, and the settings are read from this app settings file by default. But it also means that to change an application setting, we would have to redeploy, and that is not very convenient, right? To avoid that, Azure App Service resources allow you to manage app settings directly on Azure, via the portal or via the CLI. Let's have a look at how we can do that. So, I'm looking at our web app. Now let's scroll down a bit here to environment variables. If you have a look at the environment variables blade, we see that we can define app settings here. Next to that, we can also define and add connection strings. Whatever you set here overrides what's been defined in your appsettings.json file. By the way, all of this is also encrypted when stored, so this is a convenient and relatively safe way to manage your application settings. Let me test this. I'm going to add an application setting that will override the amount of destinations to return when searching for destinations. It's currently set to 2 in our app settings file. There's hierarchy in the app settings file. Destinations is the parent of amount to return, so we need to reflect that hierarchy when defining the app setting. We do that by starting with destinations, the parent, double underscore amount to return, the child. And let's set its value to 5. Let's click apply. Now let's click apply here as well. This will result in the app restarting, so the new settings can be picked up. Let's confirm. And then let's navigate to it. So let me go to the overview and click on the domain here again. Okay, and let's get the destinations. And there we go, we get back 5 destinations instead of 2. That means that this value is coming from the environment variable app setting we just defined on the portal. While we're at it, let me show you how you can change this setting via the CLI. The command for that is az web app config app settings set. We pass through the name of the app service, we pass through the resource group, and we pass through the setting we want to set. In our case, we want to set destinations double underscore amount to 3, let's say, for the demo. So we pass through the key equals the value. And let's give this a try. So let me refresh this. And this time we indeed only get back 3 destinations. We don't have connection strings to take into account yet, but that works in a likewise manner. We will look into that into more detail, including how to manage those settings and connection strings from Visual Studio in one of the next sections when we get to deal with storage and the settings related to that. For now, let's continue by looking into scaling.